Hey guys, it's Chelsea from Little Mountain Ranch, and today I wanted to talk to you about something that is really important to me, but not something that I've talked about at great length on my channel. And that is the idea of prepping and what prepping means to me specifically. If you've been watching my channel for a while, then you know that's part of the reason why we've made the decisions we've made to live the lifestyle we lead is because of our sort of philosophy around preparedness. What sort of things were we preparing for? Well, kind of your typical things, potential government upheaval, environmental catastrophes of some kind, or job loss or anything like that. We were sort of trying to cover the gamut by making this particular choice. Over the last couple of years, this new idea of preparedness has started to evolve within me, and it's based a lot upon our experiences that we've had with climate change over the last couple of years. Now, before you turn off this video and jump all over the fact that I just said the word climate change, because there's a lot of different perspectives around climate change. Whether climate change is legitimate at all, whether climate change is human caused, whether it's just part of the nature's cycle, whether it's part of the end times prophecies, all of these different kinds of ideas. People kind of have very strong opinions about climate change. I'm gonna stay away from my thoughts and ideas around what I think climate change is or isn't, because I'm not interested in that kind of debate or controversy at this point. However, what I do want to talk about is how the change in the world that I'm experiencing is affecting me and affecting my choices around preparedness. So last summer, we experienced some pretty dramatic drought in our area, and then we ended up having this dry lightning storm that sparked some massive fires, and over 1 million hectares were burned over the season, and it was pretty catastrophic. And we were ourselves personally evacuated from our property for 47 days. You can go back if you want to see some of those videos. I'll link them somewhere up here or down here if you want to check those out. So that was my first kind of experience with environmental disaster of some kind. What I want to talk to you about in this video is preparing for environmental changes. I have personally experienced in my lifetime a sort of gradual change in the overall climate in our particular area. And what that means as far as preparedness goes is I'm needing to change my approach with how I grow food on my property, how I have power happening on my property, how I raise animals on my property, all of these different kinds of things, because the climate has changed from the time when I first started this kind of lifestyle about 20 years ago. So the types of changes that I have personally experienced in the last couple of years especially is definitely extended droughts. And with those extended droughts have come pretty crazy forest fires. And currently right now, and this is sort of what has me thinking about this the way that I am, is so last year there was about 140 forest fires burning in British Columbia. And at the same time, this year we have over 600. And I'm going to show you shortly how that's sort of influencing my farming endeavors right now. I'm in my greenhouse because it is too smoky outside to actually be outside, and when I'm outside I'm needing to wear a mask, and a decent mask that actually filters particulates, because the particulate matter in the air is high enough to be quite dangerous. That was sort of a little bit of a digression in that the long and short of why I'm wanting to share this with you is the types of changes I'm needing to do on my farm, because what I can be expecting going forward is more of this. So the predictions are, going forward, a specific area is going to be experiencing hotter than normal summers, higher drought conditions, and because of a whole bunch of different reasons of why our forests are the way they are currently, which is a separate video unto itself, the forest conditions are primed for super fires, massive fires. So what I have personally experienced is a change in the way that I'm needing to garden. We have a very short growing season, and there's not a lot of wiggle room in there for production. So basically we can usually plant by May 20th, and then everything needs to be pretty ready to come out of the garden by like the very end of August or within the first 2 weeks of September. We're definitely experiencing frost by then. So anything that is a fragile plant, or a plant that is susceptible to cold, like squashes and tomatoes and those kinds of heat-loving plants, they need to be done by then. So what we experienced this year, and this is similar to last year, is we ended up with a frost at the beginning of June. We also ended up with some pretty severe hailstorms, and those knocked out a lot of my plants. I lost, I can't remember, but I think it was something like 50 of the pickling cucumbers that I put out in the garden. I did end up being able to replant some of that, but had that hail come even a week or two later, I wouldn't have had a big enough window and it wouldn't have been worthwhile to replant. So we're dealing with that. Then we're dealing with drought conditions, which require infrastructure for irrigation. And now what we're experiencing, and this is something that I didn't really think about before, we have really extreme smoke cover that's basically acting like cloud, causing a major cooling in the temperatures, and also not a lot of sunlight getting through. So what's happening with my heat-loving plants, particularly my squashes and my pickling cucumbers, is they sort of stopped developing. So my larger squashes that already had a good go, they're still going, but my pickling cucumbers have almost halted as far as amount of fruit that I'm getting off of those plants now compared to what I was before the cloud cover came over. And so what's going to happen is I'm likely going to, unless this smoke clears out within the next couple of days and we get some really good heat for the last stretch of our growing season, I'm likely going to end up losing a good amount of my squash. I grow a lot of squash, a substantial amount of squash, and to lose that with all the work and everything that I've put into it is a pretty major loss. And we actually ended up losing our entire garden last year because the irrigation was needing to go into keeping all our buildings wet and everything else, because we actually had forest fire that was close enough to cause a threat to our farm. So the garden got lost because of that. What this all has me thinking about is changing my approach to gardening based on environmental changes, or even if you want to say that climate change isn't a real thing, even if you want to say that, because I'm gardening in a way that actually matters as far as our overall budget. It matters with the type of food I'm able to feed my children, garden organic versus commercial, and all this kind of stuff. It's a huge loss for us to lose it. So learning to find ways to garden that keep in mind the fact that there is possibility of loss due to all different kinds of things, but drought, even extreme cold, as well as now what we're dealing with is the second year in a row of extreme smoke, which is cooling the temperature down of our area quite substantially during where it should be really hot and everything should be growing well. So what that's looking like for me is looking at different irrigation methods, looking at row covers for all of my tender plants so that I'm not as vulnerable to frosts and hails as I am currently. Starting some of my plants earlier, really doing a lot of research into short season varieties, and then also looking at growing. This is kind of going into my, kind of extreme prepper mindset. We're looking at building a all-season greenhouse off the south side of our property, actually with the help of one of my subscribers, the old guy Bert. He has designed this amazing greenhouse for the side of our house that we're hoping to be able to get going on fairly quickly, but to be able to grow all seasons with an alternative source of light. So that would be grow lights. And then of course, then I think, okay, well, I'd want to do solar light. I'd want to do solar panels for those grow lights, blah, blah, blah. And then I think, okay, well, if we were depending on solar right now on this property, we would basically have no power for the entire time that it's been overcast by the clouds. And we're looking at 2 weeks right now that it's been like this. That's not really the most secure source of power. So then we're thinking about hydro, but then you think about drought, and it sort of becomes a bit of a rabbit hole of how to circumvent as many different catastrophic outcomes as possible. Now, of course, there are limits to what we can do, but I think that starting to think about gardening and growing food, raising animals in a changing environment, I think is something that we're going to be looking at as we move forward. There's definitely a trend to a change. And I think that as homesteaders and as preppers, it's wise to examine that and make our choices around how we're going to be running our homesteads based on that knowledge. One of the things I'm dealing with right now, and this is something that I didn't really think about even after last year, is that all of the farm work that needs to be done on the farm has to be done in conditions that are actually hazardous to our health. So having lots and lots of masks on hand is all of a sudden something that is a requirement. And because it's actually not possible, at least for me, to be outside working. You can hear the graveliness in my voice. I've been feeling really sick for the last couple of days, having to be outside. So just doing the actual work, it's not like it's an option to stay in the house all day long when you have a farm or a garden. So these are just things that have been mulling around in my brain, and I thought it was an important conversation to bring up. Again, I'm not looking for a debate on whether climate change exists or not or anything like that. I'm basically just opening up the discussion around different things that we can do to sort of prepare for different things that can happen in the environment. Because I think that I think it's a wise thing to look at, and it's really not something that I considered prior to the last 2 years. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take you outside and show you how it is looking out there and what we're dealing with, and then show you a little bit of the garden. So yeah, it's pretty gross, isn't it? I don't know if you guys can actually even hear me with this mask on, but I'll show you how the garden is growing, especially the hugelkultur area here. There's a pumpkin. Nice looking little zucchini. But it's the pickling cucumbers that I've noticed the biggest drop in production with. So I'll show you some of the other squashes and something that I noticed yesterday, which is pretty gross. So this is one of my spaghetti squash here, and I've rubbed most of it off already, but you can see here, this is actually ash that's on this. I don't remember what this squash is called, but this one looks really good. Hubbard squash. These are one of my favorites, just to grow. They're so beautiful. Isn't that a beautiful little squash? I think what's going to happen is that all the squashes that are really good size, I think those are going to keep ripening, and I've often had to pull all my squash off and then bring them inside, and they keep ripening by a window. I've had to do that with spaghetti squash before, and I haven't had a problem with it. So, but I think anything that's kind of small is just not going to get enough heat or sunlight to grow big enough to be able to bring in and ripen in the house. The hardest part for me with all of this, well, there's two things really, is not being able to be out in the garden for hours and hours on end. I can basically be out here for about 30 minutes and that's it. And also the kids can't play outside, like at all. It's way too smoky for their young little lungs. So we have them inside doing all kinds of things. One of my little ones made a whole bunch of beanbags, sewed a whole bunch of beanbags up yesterday, and they're playing beanbag games, and there's computer games going on, and lots of reading, and lots of playing crib and chess, which are the two main games that the kids play around here. So that's kind of been the hardest part of this whole entire thing. But I'm just gonna check around at a few more and see what else is growing in here, because I haven't actually been out here to take a look at how everything's doing. It's kind of inspiring me a little bit, because I was starting to feel kind of down when I came out to pick pickling cucumbers yesterday, and there weren't any that were ready. So this is kind of encouraging. These ones are a small eating pumpkin, and there's a whole bunch of them in there. You can see in there and there. This one's too small. I'm actually gonna take off all the ones that are not going to ripen for sure, so the plant can put any energy into getting the rest of these. This one plant has probably 10 on it. Holy smokes, look at the size of this pumpkin. And I have never in my life grown a pumpkin this big. I'm so excited. So this is in the hugelkultur bed, and this is a huge, so this is the Dill's Atlantic Giant Pumpkin, and it is massive. I mean, it's massive as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, that's really exciting. All right, so on that note, my friends, I am going to go now and head back in the house and get all my canning jars washed to do a whole bunch of canning in the next couple of days, which is something that will uplift my spirits substantially. So I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up. Let me know down below kind of what you're noticing about the way that you're needing to change, how you're going about homesteading or any other lifestyle actually. Have you noticed changes, and are there things that you're doing to mitigate the sort of ramifications of those changes on you? Whew, gotta get this mask back on. Okay, we'll see you again soon. Bye.